You don't lack discipline. That's the lie that's been damaging you. If you were truly lazy, you wouldn't feel frustrated by inconsistency. You wouldn't care. You wouldn't keep restarting. But you do. Which means the problem is not effort, it's structure. Most men believe inconsistency comes from hard days, stress, fatigue, pressure. That belief is comforting and completely wrong. Consistency doesn't break on hard days. It breaks on normal ones. The days with no urgency, no pressure, no consequences. That's when discipline quietly disappears. This is stillness and direction. If you're here looking for motivation, this will disappoint you. But if you want to understand why consistency collapses even when you know what to do, stay. And if this way of thinking resonates, like the video and subscribe, not for inspiration, but so you stay connected when motivation inevitably fades again. Here's what no one tells you. Inconsistency is not a failure of will. It is a failure of decision permanence. You decide every morning, every workout, every task. That means discipline resets daily, and anything that resets daily will eventually fail. You wake up motivated, you act, you feel in control. Then the day feels ordinary. No resistance, no reward, no drama. And suddenly the rule feels optional. I'll do it later. Today doesn't matter. I've been consistent enough. This is the exact moment consistency dies. Not loudly, not dramatically, silently. Most men don't notice it because nothing bad happens immediately. That delay is dangerous. The Japanese understood this centuries ago. They noticed that men didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because their discipline depended on how the day felt. So they asked a different question. What kind of system works when nothing feels important? What kind of discipline survives boredom? What kind of structure continues when motivation is gone and no one is watching? That question led to a system so quiet, most men overlook it entirely. A system that does not ask you to feel driven or inspired or focused. It simply removes choice. This is why modern advice fails you. Stay consistent, build habits, find your why. All of it assumes emotion will cooperate. It won't. Emotion is unreliable by design. The Japanese didn't fight emotion. They made it irrelevant. They built consistency that operated even when the mind didn't care, even when boredom set in, even when effort felt pointless. That's the difference. You've been trying to feel consistent. They built systems that did not require feeling anything at all. And until you understand this, you will keep repeating the same cycle. Start strong, fade quietly, restart with guilt. This chapter is not meant to motivate you. It's meant to expose the real enemy, normal days. Because if your discipline only exists when life feels demanding, it doesn't exist at all. In the next chapter, I'll explain why motivation is not just unreliable, but the main reason consistency collapses, and why every system built on motivation is guaranteed to fail eventually. Motivation feels powerful. That's why it's dangerous. It gives you the illusion that consistency is finally solved. You feel driven, focused, ready. And then, without warning, it disappears. Not because you failed, but because motivation was never designed to stay. The Japanese understood something modern advice ignores. Anything that depends on emotion will collapse under repetition. Motivation is emotional energy, and emotional energy decays. That decay is not a flaw, it's its nature. This is why motivated men burn out faster than disciplined ones. They surge, they push, they exhaust themselves. Then they stop. And when they stop, they believe something is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong. They built consistency on a resource that cannot survive boredom. Most men don't quit on hard days. They quit when the task becomes routine, when effort stops feeling heroic, when progress feels invisible, when no one is impressed. That's when motivation leaves. The Japanese saw this cycle repeat endlessly, so they made a brutal decision. They removed motivation from the system entirely, not reduced it, not managed it, removed it. Jishudo was built on a rule that sounds cold to modern ears. If you need to feel motivated, the system is already broken. Why? Because motivation asks a question consistency cannot afford to answer. How do I feel today? Every time you ask that question, discipline becomes conditional, and conditional discipline does not survive long timelines. This is why productivity advice keeps failing you. It teaches you to feel ready. The Japanese trained men to act even when readiness was absent, not through force, through structure. The system decided for you before emotion could vote. Time was fixed. Action was fixed. Sequence was fixed. There was nothing to negotiate, no internal debate, no need to summon energy. Action happened because it was scheduled, not because it was desired. This is where modern men resist. They confuse lack of motivation with lack of meaning. They think, if I don't feel driven, why am I doing this? The Japanese never asked that. They believed meaning emerges after consistency, not before it. Emotion follows structure, never the other way around. This is the part most people hate, because it removes the drama. No hype, no surge, no identity boost, just repetition. But repetition without negotiation is exactly what builds permanence. Motivation gives you speed. Jishudo gives you continuity. Speed feels impressive. Continuity changes your life. This is why motivated men look productive until they disappear, and quiet men with structure keep moving forward invisibly. If this chapter feels uncomfortable, good. It means you're seeing the trap clearly, because the next chapter explains what discipline looks like when emotion is no longer involved at all. A system that works best when you're tired, bored, and uninterested. Most men quit there. That's exactly why it works. This is where most systems die. Not under pressure, not under difficulty, under repetition. Boredom is the real enemy of consistency. The Japanese understood that no system survives if it requires excitement to continue. Excitement fades, routine remains. Jishudo was designed specifically for this phase. It did not try to make repetition interesting, it made repetition inevitable. Modern men look for stimulation, new plans, new techniques, new routines. The Japanese did the opposite. They simplified. Same time, same order, same movements, every day. This was not rigidity, it was insulation. Insulation from boredom-driven collapse. When everything is fixed, boredom has nowhere to attach. There is nothing to debate, nothing to improve, nothing to optimize, just execution. This is why boredom feels unbearable to modern men. They are trained to expect novelty. When novelty disappears, motivation disappears with it. Jishudo never depended on novelty. It depended on identity. You did not ask, do I feel like doing this? You asked, this is what I do. That shift matters. Boredom cannot argue with identity. Fatigue works the same way. When energy drops, modern discipline weakens. Men start adjusting. I'll go easier today. I'll shorten it. I'll skip just this once. These small permissions accumulate. The Japanese removed permission entirely. They assumed fatigue would arrive, so they designed the system to require minimal effort. Not intensity, not willpower, correctness. Posture remained correct, timing remained fixed, Duration remained unchanged. Effort fluctuated, structure did not. This is why Jishudo survives long timelines. It does not ask you to feel strong. It asks you to not change. That sounds simple. It is not. Because when boredom and fatigue arrive together, the mind looks for escape. Jishudo denies escape, not aggressively, silently. This is where most men fail. They try to outwork boredom. You cannot. You must outlast it. And outlasting boredom requires removing choice. Choice is the doorway boredom uses. Close the door, and boredom loses power. This chapter should reframe your understanding of consistency. Consistency is not about forcing yourself through resistance. It is about not negotiating with resistance at all. The Japanese trained men to continue long after novelty died. That is why their consistency looked unnatural. They did not chase progress. They protected continuation. In the next chapter, I'll explain why even consistent men still quit, and why the final collapse usually comes from a mistake they don't even realize they're making. This is the part no one talks about, because it targets men who already believe they are disciplined. Most men don't fail because they never start. They fail because they stop after consistency begins. And the reason is subtle. They treat consistency as a phase, a season, a challenge, a temporary push. I'll do this for 30 days. I'll lock in for a few months. I'll relax once things improve. That mindset guarantees collapse. The Japanese understood something brutal. If consistency has an end date, it is already dying. Jishudo was never designed to build a habit. It was designed to remove the idea of stopping. This is where high performers fail. They are capable of effort. They can maintain routines. They can push through resistance. But they are still waiting for relief, waiting for the moment when discipline is no longer required. That moment never arrives, and when they realize this, they quit. Not because they are weak, but because they misunderstood the contract. Consistency is not an investment that pays out and ends. It is a condition you live under. The Japanese never asked, "How long must I do this?" They asked, "Is this correct conduct?" Correctness replaced duration. This removes the psychological fatigue that kills long-term consistency. Modern men burn out because they keep counting days, weeks, results. Counting creates pressure. Pressure demands reward. When reward doesn't arrive fast enough, motivation collapses. Jishudo removed counting entirely. No tracking streaks, no celebrating milestones, no emotional peaks, just continuation. This is why the system looks joyless from the outside. People ask, "Don't you ever take a break?" The Japanese answer was simple. This is not effort. This is alignment. Breaks imply strain. Jishudo eliminates strain by eliminating choice. This chapter should confront you because it exposes the lie even disciplined men tell themselves, "I'll be consistent until." That sentence is the seed of quitting. Once you attach an outcome, consistency becomes conditional, and conditional systems do not survive reality. The Japanese removed outcome. They did not use consistency to become something else. They practiced consistency because this is how one lives. That distinction is everything. If consistency is a tool, you'll put it down. If consistency is identity, there is nothing to put down. The next and final chapter shows how Jishudo completes itself, how consistency stops feeling like discipline and becomes automatic. This is the point where inconsistency disappears, not because you try harder, but because it no longer makes sense. This is where Jishudo ends. Not with intensity, not with motivation, not with victory, but with inevitability. The Japanese knew that consistency fails as long as it feels like something you are doing. Effort implies resistance. Resistance implies choice. Choice implies quitting. So they removed the final weakness. They turned consistency into identity. At this stage, you no longer ask yourself whether you will act. You only act. Not because you're disciplined, but because anything else would feel incorrect. This is the point where consistency becomes quiet. No inner dialogue, no self-congratulation, no struggle, just execution. This is why outsiders misunderstand it. They think consistency should look intense, driven, obsessive. Jishudo looks almost invisible. You do the work, you move on. You do it again tomorrow. No emotional spikes, no crashes. Modern men never reach this stage because they keep trying to feel consistent. The Japanese stopped trying to feel anything. They believed that feeling follows behavior, never the other way around. Once behavior stabilizes long enough, identity locks in. And once identity locks in, inconsistency disappears. Not because you defeated it, but because it no longer fits. Skipping feels strange. Hesitation feels wrong. Excuses feel foreign. This is the final transformation. Consistency stops being something you maintain. It becomes the environment you live inside. This is why Jishudo survives decades. Not because it pushes harder, but because it removes the conditions that allow stopping. There is no finish line, no reward waiting, no relief coming. And paradoxically, this removes pressure. You are no longer trying to stay consistent. You simply are. This is why the Japanese never talked about habits. Habits suggest optional behavior. Jishudo is not optional. It is the way you move through time. This chapter is not meant to inspire you. It is meant to close the loop. Because once consistency becomes identity, there is nothing left to optimize, nothing left to chase, and nothing left to restart. There is only continuation. Quiet, unimpressive, relentless. That is why most men never build it, and why the few who do are no longer worried about inconsistency at all. They solved it permanently. The Japanese system had a name for what most men never build. Jishudo. It does not mean motivation. It does not mean willpower. It means self-governed path. A way of living where action does not wait for emotion. This is where modern men misunderstand discipline completely. They think discipline is something you apply when you feel resistance. The Japanese saw discipline as something you install, so resistance becomes irrelevant. Jishudo was built on one ruthless assumption. Your emotions cannot be trusted to lead you. Not because they are bad, but because they are inconsistent. So the system removed them from command. This is the part that sounds extreme. Jishudo does not ask how you feel. It does not care if you are tired. It does not negotiate with boredom. It operates regardless. That is why it works. Modern discipline collapses because it still listens. How do I feel today? Do I have energy? Is this the right time? Every question reopens choice, and choice is where consistency dies. The Japanese closed that door. Time was fixed, action was fixed, order was fixed. When the hour arrived, the body moved. Not aggressively, not forcefully, automatically. This is why Jishudo feels cold at first. There is no emotional buildup, no internal encouragement, no sense of I want to. You simply act. And this is where most men quit. If this feels harsh or mechanical, this is the point where inconsistent men leave, because they mistake emotionless action for emptiness. It isn't. It is clarity. The Japanese believed that clarity comes when action is no longer argued with internally. Once action becomes automatic, the mind quiets down. Not because you tried to silence it, but because it no longer has a role. Jishudo was never about intensity. It was about removing hesitation. Hesitation drains energy faster than effort ever will. Modern men exhaust themselves by deciding over and over again, should I do it? Should I rest? Should I push? The Japanese decided once, then enforced the decision daily. This is why their consistency survived decades, not because they were stronger, but because they were spared from constant self-debate. This chapter should challenge your identity because it reveals something uncomfortable. If your discipline depends on feeling aligned, you will always be inconsistent. Jishudo demands alignment after action, not before it. You act first, emotion adjusts later. Over time, something irreversible happens. Action stops feeling heavy, routine stops feeling oppressive, because nothing inside you is arguing anymore. This is why the system looks boring from the outside. No passion, no drama, no visible struggle, just continuation. And continuation is what most men never achieve. In the next chapter, I'll explain why even this system can fail if boredom and fatigue are misunderstood. Because repetition is where discipline is truly tested, and where Jishudo reveals its most dangerous advantage.